well, welcome to Generally Speaking About
crime.
Yeah.
And cookies.
And cookies. And we should say that we recorded this episode, halfway recorded this episode, what was it, a few weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, yeah.
And then the iPad stopped recording. So then we stopped recording.
It's some technical difficulties that day.
Flipped the table over and said, that's enough.
That's it. We're
I
done.
think that day we forgot cookies too.
We did?
It just wasn't happening.
Yeah, and then
wasn't in our favor.
and then you remember you found some fortune cookies in the staff room.
Yeah.
And
we still were determined to eat something.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't finish recording, we said we deserved something.
We're like, okay, fine, we'll just talk about the cookies.
So we like just went to the staff room, kind of looked around.
Yeah. And you found 4 fortune cookies.
Yeah. Just like in the corner somewhere, blew the dust off.
Yeah.
Brought them in here.
Yeah. So the first one I opened up had no fortune in it. It was like, oh, okay, all right.
Your future's looking bleak.
Yeah. There is no future for you. There's nothing. And then you opened one up.
Yes.
And I forget.
I don't remember what it said.
It said alter something, I think, or something.
Your plans?
Yeah.
Perhaps?
Something. And then I opened one up.
We had a good chuckle. And
yeah,
then
and
you
we
opened
laughed.
yours up.
Yeah, I opened mine up, and I had the same fortune that Jenny had.
With the same, like, lucky numbers on the
Same
back.
everything. Yeah, everything was the same. It just seemed like, I don't know, this
What
one.
a strange day.
Yeah, and then, so we knew we were going to do this today. We've been talking about it, and then I was getting ready to come upstairs to record this and realized I left my notes at home. So I feel like this one is, because I thought I had it saved on my work computer, but I didn't, and it also wasn't on here, and so I had to go home and get it and come back. So
if anything else happens, I think it's the subject matter.
I think it is
like
too.
Jinxing us somehow.
Yeah, it's a difficult subject. This is not. I don't know if you remember the last podcast that I did. I talked about the Amityville Horror.
Yes.
Which I thought was interesting. There were a lot of different things we talked about, and I said at least once. I think I said it twice. I'm not going to do a murder next time. Like I'm not going to. I already know what I'm talking about, and it's not a murder.
And
then spoiler alert. I'm talking about a murder.
Well, that's because someone else spoiled it for us.
Yes.
No name given.
No, we won't say any names, Alexis.
When you work in a library and you're trying to do research, you sometimes have to go put books on hold or request items from other libraries to fully do your research.
Which is what I did.
And then there was someone with prying eyes who looked at the shelf and knew immediately what crime.
Yeah, because it was like I had ordered this DVD and it was right on the cover, and then there was a little slip in it that had my name on it, and I was like, oh, that must be what she's doing. And you mentioned this.
You'll revisit it sometime?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you did mention maybe in our first podcast or second one that, I mean, obviously we work in a library and we're using materials for these that anybody can access in the library system, which I think is great. So, which is what I was doing, and now and then everybody knew what I was going to talk about. So, I mean, it is what it is.
You'll have to tell the person who handles our library loan to put everything for you in a little black baggie.
So I actually, it's funny that you mentioned that.
Oh, really?
No, they're not. So I had some things coming on hold for this discussion, and I said, listen, you got to put them on my desk, but just like cover them up with paper so that nobody can see them, because there's usually a lot of stuff on my desk. So
you don't need to cover it up.
So
just get covered up.
It just blends in with everything
else
there. So I had a couple things that were like hidden on my desk. So but.
Should we mention where we're going next month?
Yeah, it's like less than a month away.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Yeah.
And I feel like we should mention, too, that no library funds are being used in this trip.
That's true. We're paying for it all ourselves, all out of pocket.
So Cheri and I are heading off to Orlando for Crime Con, everybody.
Yay! We're going to be at Crime Con, which we're really excited about.
Never been there?
Nope.
Really don't know what to expect other than the updates we keep getting in our email.
Yep.
There's going to be. Still don't really know what to expect.
Yeah, because they haven't come out with a schedule as of right now yet. So, but there's going to be a lot of really interesting content creators there, journalists, authors,
even detectives.
People involved with the Justice Department, FBI.
You know who I want to meet? Marcia Clark.
Is she going to be there?
I don't know, but I would.
I would too. She actually is an author. We have a couple of her books, and they're good. I read them. Yeah, she's a good writer. Yeah, and I would definitely like to see her if she's there. Maybe she'll be there. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
And there's also some like victims' family members who are going to be there too. So
yeah,
I think it's going to be really interesting. It's like a 2-day thing, 3 days, 3 days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, you're right.
Yep.
Listen, I'm just along for the ride. I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah.
But we do plan on maybe recording in our hotel room.
Yeah. Yep.
You have to be your room or mine.
Yeah, we have separate rooms.
Yeah. We're not that close.
Okay. I mean, they might be next to each other, but we have our own separate rooms.
I think Cheri put on her request when she reserved her hotel room to be next to Jenny Goodall. And then I said, please keep me away from Cheri Magden.
As far away from Cheri as possible. I'm not actually sure. I mean, I know I would like to be next to you, but
I did. I'm just kidding. Would it be cool if it was one of those hotel rooms that like share a door?
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah.
I've always wanted to stay in one where I knew the person next door.
Yeah, that would be cool. I don't know. We'll update you from Orlando and we'll let you know how that.
We'll let you know if there's a door that connects both of our rooms.
Yeah, right.
We'll let you know about a lot of things.
Yeah, no, we're like Jenny said, we're really looking forward to the convention and being down there and learning a lot and going to hear different speakers and different presentations. So so we leave on the 21st. Of next month.
Yeah. All right. So be looking for a special presentation from us.
Yes.
From CrimeCon.
From CrimeCon. Yeah. Yeah, that'll be great.
All right.
All right.
Excuse me. Dive into your topic.
Yes. So as I said when we recorded this last time, this was not an easy one for me to do. Anybody who's listening to this will already know about this case, and you actually guessed it. So Jenny and I typically don't know what the other person is doing.
Oh yeah.
Right? So she would say, like, is it on the JFK assassination?
And well, you know what you said.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said your husband was kind of interested in whatever you're watching.
Well, I said he was,
I figured knowing your husband, who likes history, that it had to be something historical.
Yeah.
So, and I think you mentioned JFK at some point that would be a good one to do because of all the conspiracy theories out there.
Yeah.
So that's why I jumped to that.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened I was listening to a Dateline episode on this very topic.
Yes.
And then I just threw it out there. And I said, are you doing it on blank? Maybe.
And then I walked away.
And then usually in that situation you would just say no. So I knew I guessed it when you said maybe.
Yeah. Well, you did guess it. It's Charles Manson. Yeah. So the reason I was not planning on talking about another murder. And this one is, I mean, all murders are terrible, but this one is especially gruesome and awful and horrific. But even though this happened, my math, I want to say 54 years ago this month, there are still things about this case that are happening now. So one of the Manson girls was just released on parole. So we're going to talk about that aspect of the case a little bit as well, because there are still a few people in prison for these murders, and like, if one of them is out on parole now, how does that affect the other two? Like, will they, I mean, I guess we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. So I think I'm going to do this in the order that I had it typed up here. So we're going to start off with the murders, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about them because I think most people already know they're pretty horrific, they're pretty brutal, and then we'll talk a little bit about Charles Manson and how he developed his family, and then we'll get to the legal side of it if that sounds good.
I agree with that approach.
Okay. Because last time I did it, I started with Charles Manson. I had to like keep flipping my notes.
Yeah. Well, was I asking a lot of questions that probably made you?
No, that's good too. I think you should, because I think it's interesting that you were also watching something on the same thing that I'm talking about. Like, I just think a lot of times we look at we just watch the same things, or I don't know, listen to the same things. But anyways. So let's start with Charles Manson and the crimes that he and his family committed. So on the night of August 8th, 1969, 4 members of the Manson family, Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, whose nickname or pseudonym was Sadie Mae Glutz, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian arrived at 10,050 Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, California. The house was owned by Rudolph Altobelli, who frequently rented the house to famous Hollywood types, including actors Henry Fonda, Cary Grant, Diane Cannon, And the residents of the house before Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski moved in were Terry Melcher, who's a record producer, and the son of Doris Day, the actress. And he was living there with his girlfriend at the time, Candace Bergen.
Okay.
So they had moved out, and the new tenants at that address were Sharon Tate and her husband, movie producer Roman Polanski. And Roman Polanski was in Europe, either producing a movie or there was something being filmed, I think, in Europe. And so Sharon had a small get-together with some friends, including Abigail Folger, who was the heir to the Folger Coffee Company. Her boyfriend, Wojciech Frykowski, who was also friends with Roman Polanski, and men's hairstylist Jay Sebring, who was a former boyfriend of Sharon's, and they just remained close. And so they were just all hanging out. There was somebody else, there was a caretaker on the property named William Garrettson, and he lived in a small guest house or cottage house on the property, and an acquaintance of his, an 18-year-old named Stephen Parent, had stopped by just to hang out, and they didn't really know each other, they weren't super close, but they were just kind of hanging out and listening to records. And Stephen didn't stay there very long, but unfortunately he was there long enough to run into the Manson family as he was leaving. So he was driving off the property, they were coming in, he was attacked by Tex Watson with a knife, and then was shot 4 times. He was murdered in his car as he was leaving, and he was the first fatality on that night at Cielo Drive. So the details of the killings of Sharon Tate and her friends are difficult. The deaths were horrific. I had written in here how many times they were stabbed, but I don't think that matters because it was just really, really awful and really gruesome and really terrible. Sharon Tate pleaded for her life and for her unborn child. She was 8.5 months pregnant. And those cries went unheard, and the people that killed her did not care about her or her baby. And she was murdered. They were both murdered. The brutality of the killings was seen the next morning when the housekeeper arrived for work and found some of the bodies in the lawn. In addition to the Stephen Parent who was in the car, she then saw bodies in the lawn, and the police arrived shortly thereafter and found an equally horrific scene inside the house. And they did notice that somebody had written the word pig in blood on the kitchen wall. So that was August 8th. So while the police were beginning their investigation of the Tate murders, on the morning of August 9th, the Manson family was preparing for another night of bloodshed. They arrived at 3301 Waverly Drive, also in Los Angeles. It was the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca, who lived just next door to a house where the family had actually been to a party the year before. That's the only connection that I could find to that. Why they picked that address.
They weren't at that house for the party, or was it?
It was a house next door.
Yeah, the house next door.
Yep. So Charles Manson was unhappy with the way the murder had happened the night before, which is hard to imagine. So he was on site to oversee the 6 of his followers who were there to kill the LaBiancas. So it was the 4 people from the previous night. So it was Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, and Leslie Van Houten and Clem Watson were the other 2 people who joined them that night on the 9th. And they proceeded to kill the LaBiancas in horrific ways. And there was also writing on the wall in the kitchen in that house, too. Patricia Krenwinkel wrote, "Rise, death to pigs," and "Helter Skelter," although she spelled Helter wrong. She spelled it Hilter. Not that that matters, and she wrote those in the kitchen on the wall in Lino LaBianca's blood, which is really awful. So the city of Los Angeles, and I think the whole country, was kind of what is happening? These crimes are so awful. Who is doing this? So of course now we know who did it, right? We know it was Charles Manson. So let's take a look at him. Let's talk a little bit about him. So he was born to a 15-year-old mother in 1934, and he had the very definition of a dysfunctional childhood. He had a difficult and complicated relationship with his mother, who was an alcoholic who spent time in prison. He never knew his father, and he was in trouble most of his teen and tween years, spending the majority of that time in reform schools and at Boys Town. He ran away frequently, committing crimes, including felonies. He did get married. He has 2 children. He got married to his first wife, Rosalie Wills, in 1955. They resettled to California. She gave birth to a son. I was never able to find anything more about him. There is another son that I did actually watch an interview with. So they divorced in 1958, and I think they had no connection to
Yeah.
Charles Manson after that, which, can you blame them? I mean, who would want to be in touch with that guy? So Charles Manson's crimes as an adult included theft, prostitution, and forgery, which kept him in and out of prison until 1967. So by the time he was released, he had spent more than half his life behind bars.
Oh.
Yeah, he was just a bad guy. So he lived for a time in San Francisco before moving to Los Angeles. And this is the part of the story probably where everybody knows. Charles Manson, a charming but violent and racist psychopath, begins to form his family. Many of his followers, including Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Lynette Squeaky Fromm, were from pretty solidly middle-class families who were drawn to him for a variety of reasons. I mean, he had no redeeming qualities, but there was something about him.
Well, he read that book while he was in prison.
Yeah. What was the name of that? It was like How to Win Friends and
How to
Influence
influence
People.
people.
Yeah.
Friends.
Yeah.
Other way around. How to make friends and influence people.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who wrote that? Who wrote that?
Don't ask me.
Was it Carnegie or no?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah. So he must have taken some things from that, like to.
Now, another thing that I heard in my Dateline episode, I think, was that, well, it's interesting because I think it kind of contradicts his childhood from what you're saying.
Okay.
That he actually had a decent childhood.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not what I read.
And that there's someone in his family, it doesn't sound like it could have been his father or his mother, who was like a pastor or
like somebody who read for him. Yeah.
So he was able to gain like this oratorical type talent from being in church.
Okay.
And was able to persuade people that way.
Okay.
He was very influential. Of course, I'm sure that book helped him too.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, like there's two different pictures here painted.
Yeah,
I don't know which is which, or maybe it's a combination.
Yeah, maybe
of
a
the
combination of the two. Yeah, I don't know.
It seems like he picked up skills along the way that he could twist.
Yeah.
And use to his favor.
Right. Yeah, I think he was that kind of person. I mean, it's like cult leaders are like that, right? They can find vulnerable people.
Yes.
They can speak to them in a way that makes them feel important, right? So it was interesting. I can't remember if I heard this on the audiobook or I read it somewhere, that when he first met Patricia Krenwinkel, he told her how beautiful she was, and she'd never heard that from anybody. She had she had low self-esteem, and he said that to her, and she was like, wow, this person is amazing. He's, he must really care about me. So he just had that way about him of, I don't know, influencing people, right?
And I think he made that statement too, that he would seek women who were bent but not broken. So, as you said, someone who is struggling, but not too bad, like not too down in the dumps, I guess, but someone who you could probably use to your advantage somehow. Bring back to work for you.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was charismatic. There's no way around that. He did have something about him that made these people follow him and do whatever he said, which is, I mean, he used it in a very negative way, obviously. But
yeah, you wonder sometimes if these types of people could use it for good.
Right.
What could they have done?
Right, exactly.
Because, I mean, there's got to be some level of intelligence there, right?
Yeah.
For
his followers, for sure.
Yeah, to convince others to follow you, believe what you believe in.
I mean, some of these people in high school were like, active in academic pursuits and athletics. They were good students. Some of them had gotten into drugs, and that was part of the reason that I think that part of what Charles Manson did.
Yeah, the period of free love and all the drugs
and
that didn't help.
Yeah,
the case.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, I think he did find these people that were maybe missing something in their lives, or they felt something was missing, and he was able to fill that for them.
Yeah.
But it's like, you think about like Jim Jones, like how did he manage to convince all those people to drink that cyanide? What is it about these people that...
You gotta believe what you believe in or what you're saying.
Yeah, right? I mean, I think that would be a really interesting podcast too, like these...
Yes.
These cult leaders, and I don't know. It's scary. It's scary to think that they're out there. These people are out there that can... do those things. But anyways, so Charles Manson was kind of a self-styled messiah figure. And his followers, some of them, believed that he was like a reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And he began imparting his vision of the future to them. that America was headed to a race war, that white America would be defeated by black America, and the new leaders would need the help of chosen people. Guess who the chosen people were?
White people?
Charles Manson and his followers.
Oh, so it's more limited than
it so happens that there's going to be this terrible thing, and then the people who are running the country are going to need the help of Charles Manson and his followers.
Oh, he is Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. It makes sense, right?
But so this is after he's been rejected as the next member of the Beatles, right?
Yeah, so we're going to get to the music part of
okay.
this.
All right,
Yeah. Although functionally illiterate, Charles had musical aptitude.
Oh!
And
you say what now?
Did somebody say music? Did somebody say the Beatles? So he had met Brian Wilson, or sorry, I always say Brian Wilson. It's Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys.
But they're both in there, right?
Yeah. He met Dennis Wilson through two of his girls who were hitchhiking, and he picked them up, like on the side of the road or whatever.
Kind of regrets that decision.
Yeah, right. Well, he did. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the Manson family eventually moves into Dennis Wilson's house in Los Angeles. And Dennis encouraged Charles' musical endeavors and introduced him to Terry Melcher, who you might remember used to live at 10,050 Cielo Drive. He introduced him to Terry Melcher, who was the producer for the musical group The Byrds. And Dennis Wilson actually recorded a song written by Charles Manson, but I don't think Charles Manson got writing credit for that or songwriting credit.
Yeah, and he didn't like it because he changed the words.
Yeah, they changed the words and the title. So,
So is it really the same song?
I don't know. But Charles Manson and his family actually recorded songs under the direction of both Wilson and Melcher. But the relationship between Charles Manson and Dennis Wilson deteriorated, and the family was eventually evicted from the house from which Dennis Wilson had already fled, fearing for his life.
Ooh.
Yeah, they were a scary group. I mean, they were just...
It's a good thing he got out of there.
Yeah, exactly. The family eventually found their utopia at Spahn Ranch, owned by George Spahn, in a former movie set where, like, The Lone Ranger, the TV series, was filmed. And every once in a while, they'd have westerns that were filmed there. But by the time the Manson family... It was a dairy farm for a while, but by the time the Manson family got there, it wasn't really used for, like... It wasn't it wasn't a working farm anymore. It wasn't used as a backdrop for westerns. It was sort of like a place that you could go and...
Now it's got a whole new meaning.
Yeah. You could, before the Mansons got there, you could go there and you could rent a horse or something for the afternoon and go riding around in the desert. The Manson family arrived on the scene in 1968 and quickly ingratiated themselves to the owner, who was in his 80s and partially blind. And he was also a little bit fearful of, Charles Manson and his family. The family lived under the guidance of Manson, who created a utopia of sex and drugs. It was free of calendars, clocks, and time, and he filled them with his frightening view of the future. I remember reading that there were no clocks and there were no calendars there, so there's no sense of, like, what day it was. It's all one.
That's what you do to control people. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I read that when he was giving drugs, excuse me, I have something in my throat. When he would give them LSD, like, he would either not take any or he would just take a tiny bit so that he could control what was happening in the group. Yeah, he had total control over all of them. So in November 1968, the Beatles released what became known as the White Album. This is my dad's White Album, back from the 60s. And Charles Manson believed that the Beatles were sort of speaking to him through this album, because if you look, there were some of the songs on here that he felt the Beatles, like, speaking to him directly, and the Beatles were in favor of Charles Manson's apocalyptic race war that was about to happen.
That is just creepy.
It's crazy, but he looked at it and he was like, okay, where is it? So Sexy Sadie is one of the songs, and he had already renamed one of his followers to Sadie Mae Glutz, and he was like, oh, they know that. That's why that song is there. It had nothing to do with, the Beatles did not know each other.
Obviously.
You know what I mean?
So, I mean, it's confusing in a way, like, he seems like an intelligent guy.
Yeah.
But then yet he firmly believes that the Beatles were trying to tell him.
Yeah, so he thought Helter Skelter was...
of his mission.
Yes. Helter Skelter was the Beatles' way of saying, yes, we support what you're doing. So that was the song that really got him. And he believed it was a call to action. Now, we talked about this before. Do you remember what a Helter Skelter is?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember.
So, a Helter Skelter looks like this. So it's a playground, or something you might see at like a fair in England, like a county fair or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a tower with a slide that goes around it.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the lyrics, I think the lyrics are something like you get down to the top, or you get down to the bottom, then you go back to the top again, which is like
that's what it is.
riding a slide.
You're explaining what the slide does.
Yeah, exactly. So Manson interpreted that song as a call to start what would eventually be the race war that he had promised his family. And the Beatles completely rejected the notion that they were supportive of an upcoming race war and that their songs were speaking to Charles Manson in any way whatsoever. But some of the things that were on this album were what were written like on the wall, like Helter Skelter was one of them, and Piggies. Where's the one about?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, Piggies. Yeah. On the nights of August 8th and 9th, the violent, sadistic, horrific murders of 7 innocent people shocked and scared not just Los Angeles, but the surrounding area and the whole country. And this is where the next part of the story begins, which is the investigation into these crimes. Mm-hmm. So the LAPD began investigating the crimes, but viewed the 2 homicides, so the Tate murders and the LaBianca murders, as separate attacks that were unconnected to each other. Obviously, in hindsight, it's easy to see some similarities, right? So there's a frenzied overkill of just, horrific numbers of stab wounds and words and phrases written in the victim's blood. But there were enough differences to see them as random attacks of upper middle class people who lived in Los Angeles. And as the bodies from the Tate murder were being autopsied, the coroners noted similarities between the types of injuries inflicted as being similar to those of murder victim Gary Hinman, who I think we talked about last time too.
Yes.
He was an associate of the Manson family who was brutally beaten, had part of his left ear cut off, and was eventually shot to death. And his murder scene also had words written on the wall in the victim's
And he
blood.
wasn't he the first one?
He was the
murder?
first. Yeah, he was the first one.
And they were trying to get him to give up the cars.
Yeah, they were basically extorting him.
Yeah.
Like, they wanted his house.
They had lived with him, right?
He had some connection. I don't know if he lived at the Spahn Ranch. So there was a 1976 TV movie called Helter Skelter, which is available in the library system. I watched it as much as I could stand. It was actually really interesting. Then there was a remake of that movie, and I watched like the first 15 minutes, and I was like, I can't do this. This is awful. And it starts off with the murder of Gary Hinman. And so,
how recent was the remake?
I want to say it was in the 2000s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, there were some actors that I recognized their names, and I just couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
Because the movie Helter Skelter was hard enough to watch, like a TV movie, and like listening to the audiobook and like being immersed in Charles Manson and his followers. I was like,
the TV movie's probably not going to be as bloody and gory as
right.
Unless this other one was a remake for the television.
So the original Helter Skelter TV movie was actually it wasn't especially graphic, and it was very much, it followed the book Helter Skelter, which was written by Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecutor in the case. And that was just very matter of fact. That's kind of how the TV movie was, but it gave a lot of information about the family and what they did and how they got to be who they are.
So then, from what I remember from Dateline, they killed this Gary guy.
Yep.
And one of the guys in the Manson family was caught.
Yep.
Because I think they found the bloody knife in his car and stuff.
Okay.
And the police pulled him over.
Okay.
Took him to jail. Manson was afraid he was going to rat out on them. So he thinks to himself, I'm going to try to bust him out by imitating this crime elsewhere so that the police will think that person is still out on the loose committing these crimes.
Right.
Which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
That there was this really ulterior motive to commit these crimes.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think he wanted to get back at people. But really he was hoping that the police would look at this and be like, oh, we got to let this one guy out because
there's this
guy is still out on the loose doing this.
I mean, I was saying this about the Charles Manson case when I started looking into this. It was like there were a lot of confusing parts. There were all these different things happening, right? There was the music part, there were murders at the Spahn Ranch, there were the family itself, and then there were these little things like Gary Hinman and this other guy from the Spahn Ranch who worked there as a ranch hand, who was murdered and dismembered by Charles Manson because he thought that Charles Manson thought this guy was going to snitch.
Yes.
And he didn't want that to happen.
Right.
And they didn't find his body until 1977. So there's multiple, I'm primarily focused on these 2 murders, but there were these other crimes that the family was committing. So they were just,
just when you think you know the whole story.
It's like, Yeah, and I learned stuff about Leslie Van Houten, who was released on parole, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But yeah, there's just all these little side things to this story, which make it. I can understand why it was a complicated case for the police to figure out exactly what was going on. So on August 16th, 1969, so a week after these murders, multiple members of the Manson family were arrested on theft charges. They had been stealing Volkswagen Bugs, or Volkswagen Beetles, and converting them into dune buggies, because that was one thing they like to do. They like to drive around on dune buggies out in the desert.
Well, that's what happens when you wait for the race war to
Yeah,
get
what are you
kicked
going
off,
to do?
you know?
Gotta do something to pass the time, I guess.
Buggies.
Yeah. So there was a technical issue with the search warrant in that particular crime, and the family was released. They just were let out of jail.
Yeah, and that they touched upon that in Dateline also, that Charles Manson was then able to say to his followers, "See, I am Jesus. Look, we got out."
Yeah, we got out. Yeah,
And
yeah.
we got off the hook.
Yeah.
They didn't know anything about the murders.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just a technical issue with the way the search warrant was written or something. So on September 1st, like 3 weeks after the crime, a 10-year-old was playing near his home, and he found a .22 caliber revolver, like out behind his house. And he was a fan of the TV show Dragnet, which was on at the time, so he knew how to handle the gun carefully, kind of picked it up without trying. He was trying to pick the gun up without getting any fingerprints on it.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah. And he gave it to his father, who called Los Angeles police regarding the finding. So in October of the same year, both cases were still working separately of each other.
Okay.
So there were people investigating the Tate murders, and then there were people investigating the La Bianca killings. And the La Bianca team learned from the sheriff's office about the Hinman case when inquiring about whether or not there were similar cases in Los Angeles. And the people who were investigating the La Bianca murders also felt there was some connection to this album. There was something about this album that had some connection to the murders. So multiple members of the Manson family are rearrested on the auto theft charges, including Susan Atkins and Charles Manson. And then things start to happen when Susan Atkins is in prison. So discussions between law enforcement and local biker gangs with a connection to the Manson family led detectives to believe there was a connection between Charles Manson, his family, and the murders on both nights. And Susan Atkins, aka Sadie Mae Glutz, was present at both murders and the murder of Gary Hinman, and she began telling her story to her cellmates in prison. She began spilling the beans, and she was really proud of it. She was like, "You're not going to believe what we did." Like, and
you always have to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, and her cellmates were completely like alarmed and disgusted, and
I was terrified.
Yeah, they were scared of her and just scared of what she was saying, and she was really proud of it, like I said. So one of her cellmates was a woman named Ronnie Howard, and she made numerous attempts to contact Los Angeles Police Department to let them know that what Susan Atkins was saying, that there was a series of missed. Like, she didn't know who to call, or she'd get through to somebody and she'd say, "Okay, I'll be in court all day," but she didn't say what courtroom she'd be in. So the police took a while to get that connection.
Yeah.
So on December 1st, 1969, almost 4 months after the bloody murders in the suburbs of Los Angeles, LAPD issued arrest warrants for Charles Tex Watson, who was living in Texas at the time, Patricia Krenwinkel, who had absconded to Alabama, and Linda Kasabian, who was in New Hampshire. And by the middle of that month, a story in the Los Angeles Times with Susan Atkins telling her outrageous and shocking story of the murders prompted the boy's father, who found that gun, to contact LAPD again and say, "Hey, we found this gun back in October. Maybe you should look into that."
So was that close to where the murders happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I remember watching this in the Helter Skelter movie, and I think this is from the book. So Susan Atkins gives testimony to a grand jury, and stuff shows up in the newspapers covering this story. And so these newspaper reporters read that, and they're like, she had said something about they changed their clothes in the car and then they threw them out the window. And these reporters recreated where they were coming from, how long it would take them to change, and where they could go to throw their clothes out the window that would sort of line up to what she said. Yeah. And they found them. They found them on the side of a hill. And so there was additional evidence, including the bloodied clothes, and the murder weapon, in addition to fingerprints taken at the scene, continue to point towards the Manson families as the suspects in both killings. And Vincent Bugliosi, who was at the time a deputy district attorney in the district attorney's office in Los Angeles County, was chosen to lead the prosecution. And the People versus Charles Manson et al. Began on June 15th, 1970. So about 10 months after the crimes, they're in court. The state charged Manson, Krenwinkel, and Atkins with 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of conspiracy. Leslie Van Houten was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of conspiracy, since she was only present at the La Bianca murders. Okay. Manson was originally granted the right to represent himself, but his behavior in the courtroom led to that privilege being withdrawn. The Manson family continually disrupted the proceedings, laughing loudly in the courtroom, yelling nonsensical gibberish. They carved X's into their foreheads, and those not on trial set up vigils outside the courthouse armed with knives. So the Manson family members who were not on trial were camped out outside the courthouse, singing.
I thought you were saying that they were getting a following of other people too.
Yeah, I don't. Who knows? They might have. And in addition, Charles Manson attacked the judge during the proceedings when he was not allowed to question a prosecution witness. So he didn't do himself any favors in the courtroom, that's for sure. The DA's office had initially granted immunity to Susan Atkins, but that was revoked after she repudiated and revoked her grand jury testimony, in which she happily recounted the actions of the Manson family and the killings. I mean, she was just super proud of it. Never missed an opportunity to talk about it. So the prosecution then granted immunity to Linda Kasabian, who was present at both murders and was similarly charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of conspiracy, but those charges were dropped as she had not participated in the actual killings. She was there but didn't actually do it, and she testified for the prosecution.
That must have been scary for her, though, because if there's still Manson family followers outside, I couldn't imagine testifying against him, and then being released.
And they're violent. These people are, and they don't have any, there's no qualms about being violent. Where did I leave off here? So after a 5-month trial, the prosecution rested on November 16th. The defense provided little testimony, much to the chagrin of the defendants. Charles Manson testified on his behalf and repeatedly blamed the White Album as the cause of the crimes. All 4 defendants were found guilty on all charges. During the penalty phase, the 4 defendants repeatedly engaged in disruptive behavior again, including shaving their heads and yelling loudly. The 3 women testified and blamed the killings on Linda Kasabian, who had testified for the prosecution, and they said she was the one who directed all the violent acts. The jury recommended the death penalty for all 4 defendants, and on April 19th, 1971, they were sentenced to death. Tex Watson, who fought extradition from Texas to California and was not among the defendants in the first trial, was also found guilty of murder and conspiracy charges and also sentenced to death. Almost a year after they'd been sentenced to death in California, the state Supreme Court abolished the death penalty, and the sentences were automatically reduced to life in prison. So let's give an update of where everybody is now. So Charles Manson died in prison of a heart attack on November 19th, 2017, and he left behind 2 children. Susan Atkins died in prison of cancer on September 24th, 2009. She had petitioned for compassionate release because she was so sick with cancer, and it was repeatedly denied. She was a convert to Christianity behind bars and left behind a child that she had before she went to prison. Charles Tex Watson remains incarcerated in prison in San Diego. Thanks to conjugal visits with his ex-wife, he fathered 4 children while in prison. He's been eligible for parole since 1976 and has been denied parole 18 times, most recently in 2021 when he was given a 5-year denial of parole.
They were sick of hearing from him?
Yeah. He also converted to Christianity behind bars and became an ordained minister. Patricia Krenwinkel remains incarcerated in California. She has been in prison for over 50 years and was granted parole in October 2022, a decision that was overturned by the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Her next parole hearing is in November of this year. And she maintains that she is a victim of battered woman syndrome, and when asked by the parole board who she inflicted the most pain upon, she replied, myself. Now we get to Leslie Van Houten, who was released from prison in July 2023.
So she's the only one that's been officially released.
Oh, actually, no. We're going to get to that in a second. Yeah. So she was released last month after serving more than 50 years behind bars. So she actually, I didn't know this, she had an interesting legal journey to prison. So she was tried with the original group, found guilty, sentenced to death. Then the death penalty was overturned, now it became life in prison. Her attorney during the first trial disappeared during the trial.
Okay.
So he was not present for the sentencing phase of the first trial. So she was granted a mistrial. Then she was retried, which resulted in a hung jury. So, and I believe she was out on bail, so she wasn't in prison for the entire time. The second trial, her attorneys presented a defense that the amount of LSD that she had taken affected her judgment and thought process.
Okay.
And the jury was not able to reach a definitive conclusion about that, so it was a hung jury. So she was tried a third time on both the original charges, and then the state added some additional charges of theft and robbery, and she was resentenced to prison with the possibility of parole. So she was granted parole multiple times before she was released. Since 2016, she has been recommended for parole by the parole board, but those decisions were overturned by the city governors of California. And they continue to view her as a threat to society.
How old is she now?
She's in her 70s. I think she's 73.
Okay.
In May 2023, the California Court of Appeals reversed Governor Newsom's overriding of the parole board recommendation. So the parole board recommends her for release. Governor Newsom overrides that. I think her attorneys brought that to the California Court of Appeals. They reversed Governor Newsom's decision, and then the governor said, we're not going to continue to fight this.
So he let it go?
So he let go. Yep. He said he would not appeal the Court of Appeals decision, and Leslie Van Houten became the second Manson family member to be released on parole. Clem Watson served time for the murder of Gary Hinman, and he was released in 1985.
Okay.
So
Was he the one I was referring to that Manson was trying to break out of jail?
Could have been, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He only got out of jail because he wasn't involved with those other murders, those other brutal murders.
Right. Well, I do think he was there at the La Bianca killings, but I don't know that he actually took part in it. So, so that's that. So it was Leslie Houten finally being released on parole, which made me think, oh, I should talk about this because that's just an interesting part of true crime, is the criminal justice side of it, and the prosecution and the defense, and then the jail time. So, I mean, so there's two people that are still in prison. Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel are still in jail for those crimes. I would guess that Patricia Krenwinkel will probably the parole board will again approve her for release on parole, and I don't know what the governor will do. Because if you've already released one, then do you make the argument that, you know, maybe because she was at both murders, maybe she doesn't get out of prison.
Yeah,
or
right.
like, I do remember reading somewhere that Vincent Bugliosi thought that the defendants would probably serve 15 to 20 years in prison, and then they'd be released. But, I mean, Patricia Krenwinkel has been there over 50 years. I think she might be the longest serving female inmate in California.
Wow.
So, I don't know. I mean, that will be an interesting case. You know, that will be interesting when she comes up for parole in November.
Yeah.
What will happen then?
Yeah. All right. So it's already this November?
It's already this November. Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, so should these people, should they be out on parole? Like, do they have the right to rejoin society? I mean, it's the victims, the families are the victims.
Sentenced to death also. So
they were originally sentenced to death.
They weren't supposed to rejoin society.
Right, exactly. And the victims' families are outspoken in that they should never be released.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I get it too. I can see both sides. I do think what I've read that the people that are Leslie Van Houten and Patricia Krenwinkel and Tex Watson have done some good things behind bars. You know, they've helped other inmates. And
there might be some truth to the amount of LSD they were taking.
Yeah, I mean, and I see that.
I mean, you really know what's right from wrong when you're high on drugs like that?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, but then I'm like, okay, we're all adults. We all make decisions, right? I mean,
Right.
they made the choice to hook up with Charles Manson.
Yeah.
But does that mean that's an automatic, you spend the rest of your life in jail
Right,
when other
right.
people are
And
paroled?
it wasn't like a cult where he was able to convince you to join and
Right.
then you're sucked into it and
Yeah,
100% behind him.
right. So I don't know, this case has kind of left me with some like, I mean, I can see both sides of it. I can see, you know, if the concept of, you know, a prison sentence is to, you know, commit a crime and serve your sentence, if you've served 50 years in jail, is that?
And how young were these?
They were in their late teens, early 20s.
Yes, yeah. I guess my heart, I have a little softness in my heart because it's like, when you're young, you make impulsive decisions.
Right,
You're not thinking ahead.
right.
And how many of them were just like, hey, I finally found my
Yeah.
my group.
Yeah, I found people who understand me, who value me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think about the victims.
No, I know.
And I think about Sharon Tate.
Yeah.
And I think about her unborn baby.
Mhm.
And I think about the other people who were just...
And that's a whole nother level.
Right, right.
It's not like you're doing petty theft.
Right, this isn't a victimless crime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were victims, the LaBianca's children are still alive.
Yeah.
Sharon Tate has, I'm sure all of the people that were murdered have family members and
Mhm.
friends who knew them and loved them and cared about them. So it's like, I see their side too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Again, that's why I chose this one, because I think it does have some,
Well, it's gotta be awful to serve on a parole board, though.
yeah. Yeah,
So, well, good job. I know it
Thanks.
was a heavy topic.
it was a heavy, yeah, so I'm not doing a murder.
No, I
I say that now, but I don't know. Maybe it'll be something that comes up, or I've been looking at some of the speakers at CrimeCon, and some of those crimes are interesting too.
do believe mine for next time is going to be a murder.
Really?
So buckle up.
You gotta give me a clue. Is it?
No, I'm not giving you a clue.
Just one clue?
Go ahead, guess.
Well, does it take place in the United States?
Yes.
Was it the JFK assassination?
Maybe. Maybe. I gotta get out of here now. I gotta walk away.
I don't think that's exactly how it was, but that's probably pretty close.
I think you're sitting in your office chair and you said maybe all of a sudden the chair was just spinning and you were nowhere around.
Yeah, I don't know. Murder. I don't know. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, you're not
East Coast or West Coast?
East Coast, and that's all you're getting now.
So I'm saying?
I'm telling you,
Maybe.
it's one that I don't think you know about.
Okay.
So
That sounds like a challenge.
it does. Which I'm excited to do in a way because I feel like, you know, you'll be learning something new that you
Yeah,
haven't heard.
I learned a lot from your last one.
So the
too.
Donner Party?
The Donner Party, yeah. I mean, I just learned things about that. I mean, it's like Charles Manson.
Yeah,
People have
right.
heard about that, but you learn.
You know the gist of what happened.
Yeah, I know the gist of what happened. Yeah. Don't eat your friends. That's.
But let's eat some cookies. How about
Yeah,
that?
that's good. Yeah, let's transition to cookies.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right, Alexis, what do we have today?
So we're big fans of crumble cookies. Ooh, I love it.
Ooh,
That looks good.
Smell it. Take a whiff.
Oh yeah.
Ooh,
Oh, look at this one.
That's
That's the. Is that graham
that
crackers?
smells really good. Smell it.
Mm-hmm. Yummy.
That just has like county fair smell
Yeah.
all over it.
Yeah. So what do we have? We have the one that's strawberry crumb cake, and this one is cinnamon crunch.
Yeah. Let's start with the cinnamon one.
Let's do that. Let's show a picture of that one too. Yeah. Delish. All right, you want a piece of this?
I want a piece
Okay,
of
I've been
that.
accused of manhandling these cookies, so I'm gonna let you do it.
You're accused of manhandling a lot of things.
I don't think that's true.
Side note, Cheri went into Dunkin' Donuts and
That is true. Yes.
one of the workers said that she had to back off because she was manhandling the food that was.
No, what happened was
Ordered.
no. Here's what happened. So I went down to Dunkin' Donuts to pick up a mobile order, and I knew what I had ordered. I had gotten like what did I order? Avocado toast with bacon,
I've never grabbed this.
and a bagel, and something else, and then Timbits or something, or not Timbits, whatever they call them. Anyways, long story short, do you want me to keep talking about this? Why are you laughing? What?
I'll tell you when I can talk. I can't get that.
This is really good. I have no idea why she's laughing. None. Not a clue.
There we go. I couldn't get that giant piece of cereal off the roof of my mouth.
That is funny.
So I couldn't talk.
So I get in there, and I'm familiar with how Dunkin' Donuts mobile orders pickups are, and there's a bag sitting there with a bagel in it and 2 boxes. And I was like, oh, I think this is mine, but there's no name on it. So I just kind of looked in the bag. And then one of the workers behind the counter calls somebody else over, and she was like, hey, can you watch the mobile order? Somebody's manhandling the food. I was like, wait, is that me? I mean, I'm just looking, I know that's mine. I'm not like...
Are they talking about me? You can't possibly be talking about me.
I'm like, I'm not opening the boxes up. I'm just looking at them.
This looks good. I'll have to get this next time.
Yeah, so I did get chastised for...
Kind of indirectly.
Yeah.
Like you weren't personally told to stop me.
No, but it was like, we need extra...
Let's say this loud enough so she understands.
We need extra help over here because somebody's manhandling the mobile pickups.
So now when you walk into Dunkin' Donuts, there's a picture of Cheri. It says no food manhandlers allowed.
My picture is like,
this lady.
do not let her near mobile pickup orders.
That one was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I scarfed that piece right down.
Yeah, that was good. Wow,
Excellent.
super tasty.
Excellent choice.
Really good. I don't know what kind, is this like a snickerdoodle?
Kinda.
Yeah, it has that taste to it.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm cutting this one in half too. All right, well, first of all, which cookie did you like better?
Yeah.
I actually have a hard time choosing.
I know, I have a hard time
They're
too.
different. They're so different.
I say this just by like a little
But by hair?
by hair, yeah.
But not hair that's in it.
Okay, hopefully there's no hair in it.
All right, so
Wait, so which one did you pick?
I said I liked them both.
You're like, well, come on,
I
you only
cheated.
picked one of them.
I do like the cinnamon one.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
I agree with you.
And I probably wouldn't have picked that one. Like, I wouldn't have been like, oh, I'll take the cinnamon one.
Yeah.
I don't eat a lot of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but that one was just, I don't know, there's something about the cookie, it was really good.
Yeah. So I guess our last words to you are to like and subscribe. Share this with your friends.
Yep.
We're trying to build our viewership and listeners.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, and then you'll hopefully hear from us soon from Crackcon.
Live from Orlando at
Yeah,
Crackcon.
live from Orlando.
Yeah.
It actually won't be live.
Yeah, it'll be
Pre-recorded.
pre-recorded from Orlando.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.